Hello everyone and welcome to Michael's Retro Game Reviews, and this week I'll be reviewing Shinobi X for the Sega Saturn. Big thank you to Phil Wheaty of the RetroGamesNews.com. Without his incredibly generous game donation, this review would not be possible. Now, Shinobi X is a game I've always wanted to play and own, but the European version is a bit on the pricey side, and that's always put me off getting a copy of this. But thanks to Phil's very generous game donation, I now have a copy of Shinobi X for my Saturn collection, and more importantly, I can now finally review Shinobi X. So let's get on with the review for Shinobi X for the Sega Saturn. We all know that time when we change from one generation of game to the next. It's a massive shaker that totally changes everything, and usually for the better. It's one of the most amazing things about gaming and why it's come so far in its short history. Name any other media that throws at the book and starts afresh every 5 years or so. But there are casualties from this ever-changing cycle. Sometimes good games are released, but because they appear to have an older style of gameplay or graphics, or use some kind of concept that games have just moved away from. And this game was one of them victims from this cycle. Like John McClane in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yippee-ki-yay! If this game had come out a few years before the Saturn, or even now as a downloadable game, it would have definitely been more successful. But I think this game was overlooked for two reasons. Reason 1, the graphics. Doesn't matter if it was good 2D or not, at that time gamers wanted 3D. For research, I read old written reviews as they give you an idea of the opinions of that game at that time release. And one of the most funny comments I read in one of them was that Shinobi Legends doesn't use the strengths of the Sega Saturn. And I was literally like, are you kidding? The Saturn is a 2D powerhouse. It was built primarily for 2D gaming, and this game being in 2D was in fact playing into the Saturn's strengths. It's a beautiful looking game, and if you're a 2D gamer, you're going to love this. Visually, it's a huge step up from previous Shinobi games, but doesn't feel out of place as a traditional Shinobi game. And something really cool about the graphics in this game is that Shinobi X uses digitised actors. No, don't run away. But I do understand your reservations. They're done well and blend in with the backgrounds of the levels, which are done very well. Each level is vastly different from the last, but not just they look good, they test you, and level 5 will definitely have you pulling your hair out. You can trust me on that one. And reason 2, the soundtrack. Sega yet again did a Sonic CD with the music of this game. What I mean is there are two versions of this game. Shinobi Legends, which came out in Japan and the USA in '95, and Shinobi X, which came out in Europe in '96. The reason for delay in the European version was to create a brand new soundtrack. I have listened to the original soundtrack and I can see why it was changed. What's interesting is FMVs keep the original music from Shinobi Legends, and that the only thing that was changed was the music in the levels. There was no need to change the music for the FMVs as they were good enough in creating the tone and atmosphere needed, but nothing special, just not bad, not good, just Shinobi X soundtrack was composed by British video game composer Richard Jacques, who worked many years at Sega Europe in creating music for their games. Some of his most noted work is Sonic R, Sonic 3D, Daytona USA Championship Edition, Headhunter, MSR, Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future, Mass Effect, and Outrun 2. What's amazing about the soundtrack of Shinobi X was that Richard Jacques had only 2 weeks to redo the entire game's soundtrack. And to make things more interesting, the music was generated by the Saturn hardware and did not use Red Book audio, which a lot of early CD-based games did. And it just keeps getting better for Richard Jacques because of the Saturn hardware. He only had 200 kilobits of internal memory to work with. That made the challenge of replacing all 20 tracks more difficult in the short time given with the hardware capabilities of the Saturn. Richard Jacques was trying to replicate the Yuzo Koshiro style of music in Revenge of Shinobi. Awesome soundtrack by the way for Revenge, love it. Richard Jacques has said people expected me to replicate the Yuzo Koshiro style, and it's an impossible task. Yuzo Koshiro is a genius, he said. I agree, but you're a genius too, Richard Jacques. You made such an incredible soundtrack to Shinobi X, and that tune in the first level totally left shivers down my spine, so my hat's off to you. The gameplay. The best way to talk about it is to take your mind back to previous Shinobi games like the original arcade game and Revenge of Shinobi and Shinobi 3. In the original arcade game, you threw ninja things as your main form of attack. And in Revenge 3, you can still throw ninja things, but now you can also use your sword and more ninja magic. Shinobi X could have just done the same thing as Revenge or 3 and it would have been enough, but they totally reinvented Shinobi for next generation at that time. And as of now, it's my favourite game in the Shinobi series. And why is that? Because of the awesome gameplay. Shinobi X makes a few changes to the way a Shinobi game plays. Now your sword is your primary weapon. You can still do ninja magic and ninja throwing things, but they take a back seat. So your main weapon is your sword, and with your sword you have to get close to your enemies, block their attacks, deflect enemy ninja stars, Oh, by the way, if you hit an enemy ninja star with your sword, you can send it right back at your enemy. That's brilliant. And going in for the kills, definitely satisfying. By changing the game mechanics and focusing more on the sword, it adds a degree of tactic in how you attack your enemy. And what works for one enemy doesn't work for the other. But you can always fall back on ninja throwing things, but don't count on them. You don't get many unless you increase them in your options menu at the beginning. But even doing that, they still run out very fast, so use them sparingly. But to be honest, it's more fun and satisfying using your sword. The magic system is interesting. You kind of have them and you kind of don't have them. It's not like Revenge. They're more like ninja power-ups. So you collect your power-ups, and they give you temporary abilities to aid you in your quest. You have one power-up that summons a dragon, and it's very badass. You can hang on to it and use it when you get stuck or on a boss battle. And there is another magic power-up that you collect that has this ninja god follow you around, and every time you attack, he attacks too, and his attacks are devastating. So try to pick this power-up just before a boss battle, as you can't collect and keep this. Once you collect it, you have to use it right away. So that's the gameplay of Shinobi X. You have 12 levels, each with 1 or 2 end bosses. Get through the levels using your ninja sword skills. Oh, by the way, if you collect 10 blue glowing ball things, you get another continue, and the yellow and red glowing balls give you health, so don't ever pass up the opportunity to collect them. You can even attack dinosaurs. Yes, all these years I knew something was missing from a Shinobi game. Now I'm finally complete. So, my final thoughts. Shinobi X is such an overlooked game, and all I can think is, why didn't more people get this game when it came out? It's got everything a decent Shinobi game needs. It's got ninja action, decent visuals, killer soundtrack, story, and just a tad bit of Sega magic at its best. But unfortunately, it was a victim of that transitional period between 2D to 3D and simply got overlooked. Now, the American version is cheaper, but it hasn't got the killer soundtrack of the European version, so I'd recommend getting the European version. It's a bit pricey, but if you can pick it up on the cheap-ish, I would seriously recommend it. It's some of the best 2D gameplay on the Sega Saturn, and definitely gets the thumb approval. I want to thank you for watching. I also want to thank Phil again of the RetroGamesNews.com. Thank you very much. This is one of the most generous game donations I've ever gotten, and see you all next time.